The hope that a solution can be found to rising tensions between Russia and Ukraine through diplomatic efforts appears to have come to a standstill. We heard dire warnings from both the British Prime Minister and NATO Secretary General, who said that Russia's military build-up near the Ukrainian border is one of the biggest threats to European security in recent memory. Moscow has continued to deny it has any intention of invading Ukraine, saying what it calls that the threats from the West are a road to nowhere. Judith Prescott reports.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has described the Ukraine crisis as the most dangerous moment for Europe in decades. His comments came during a meeting with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg as Russian forces continue a military build-up on the frontier of its southern neighbour.
And when the Berlin Wall fell, the people of Europe made clear that they wanted their freedom and their security to be inextricably tied together. And that's why NATO agreed that any country should be free to pursue the security alliances that country chose.
Stoltenberg called on Russia to tone down military aggression and remain at the negotiating table or face severe consequences.
Russia has a choice. They can either choose a diplomatic solution, and we are ready to sit down, but if they choose confrontation, they will pay a high price. There will be economic sanctions. There will be increased NATO military presence in the eastern part of the alliance. And of course, the Ukrainian army, defense force, is much stronger now than they were in 2014.
In Moscow, while meeting with his British counterpart Liz Truss, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov dismissed the words of warning from NATO.
Ideologised approaches, ultimatums, threats. This is the road to nowhere. Unfortunately, many of our Western colleagues are carried away with this form of public activities, and I can't call it diplomacy.
So far, there are no signs that intense diplomatic activity deployed by leaders from the US, EU and NATO to defuse the Ukrainian crisis have made any headway with the Kremlin. Judith Prescott, Euronews.
Well, for more on all that diplomatic movement across Europe, let's go straight to Shona Murray in Brussels. Shona, this is a tense time, both Russian and Ukrainian military drills underway. Jens Stoltenberg saying earlier that NATO is preparing for the worst. We also heard from Boris Johnson saying that this is the most dangerous moment. Has the situation deteriorated?
Well, I think what we can say on the face of it, particularly with that flurry of diplomatic activity this week, again, the situation hasn't improved, which isn't great. I don't think necessarily it's drastically deteriorated. But of course, as we heard from Jens Stoltenberg today with his meeting with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, 30,000 Russian troops have amassed in Belarus as well. The Belarusian military and Russian military are starting military exercises together. We heard from Lukashenko saying that whatever Russia does, Belarus will do. So that's obviously deeply worrying and certainly projects the notion that there is a regional conflict underway, or at least at the eve of it. And obviously those comments from Boris Johnson saying that this is a very dangerous moment. And indeed it is. We saw the French President Emmanuel Macron on Monday in Russia after a 5-hour meeting, which, you know, looked like it went comparably well, but again, no diplomatic progress or no substance as of yet.
Well, probably comparably well compared to some of the scenes in Moscow today. We saw the British Foreign Secretary there, Liz Truss, meeting with Sergei Lavrov. A frosty reception, it's fair to say. Was this diplomacy at its limit?
Yes, I think that could be easily described as an ill-fated meeting. 2 hours Liz Truss met with her counterpart in Russia. It was ill-fated because we know that Liz Truss had put out a message that the UK was ready to impose massive sanctions against Russia in the case of an invasion in Ukraine, which probably wasn't the greatest start. But then things got really demonstrably worse when you saw that joint press conference between the two foreign ministers, where Sergei Lavrov, in a loose translation, accused Liz Truss of not listening or being deaf. He also at one point walked off, and you could feel even, you know, from afar the tension between the two of them. So I don't think that, in fact, I think we can clearly say that meeting didn't go so well, and it didn't really help Europe's as a whole efforts in trying to engage in a diplomatic end to this situation.
Indeed. Shona Murray in Brussels. Good to talk to you. Thank you, Shona. Well, while diplomacy is at a standstill, both Russia and Ukraine have begun military exercises. At least 30,000 Russian troops are in Belarus, where they've started joint military drills that are due to last 10 days. France called the exercises, believed to be Russia's biggest deployment to Belarus since the Cold War, a violent gesture. Ukraine, who at the same time has started its own military drills, says that the Russian action amounts to psychological pressure. Well, let's cross straight now to our international correspondent, Annalise Borges, who's in southeastern Ukraine. She's in Mariupol. Annalise, good to see you there. Now, we know that those military drills are underway on both sides. Kiev calling this Russian military drill psychological pressure. So how is all of this playing out on the ground?
Hi there, Helena. Well, it's certainly not helping diffuse tensions. We heard a couple of moments ago from Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Ministry through a statement that condemned Russia's military drills here in the Azov Sea and in the Black Sea, saying that these exercises will all but stop shipping, will make it impossible for shipping to take place, and will have a huge impact on Ukrainian ports. Yesterday, the Russian Defense Ministry announced that they would be blocking parts of these two bodies of water so that they could conduct, so that their navy could conduct gun firing and missile firing exercises in this region, something that Ukraine has called a hybrid war against this country and a violation of international principles, of international laws. That same statement also said that Kyiv would be working with partner countries, to prepare a response.
Meanwhile, more NATO troops have moved into position, but we do have to point out that they are vastly outnumbered by the Russian military. So will this act as a deterrent?
That is a million-dollar question, isn't it? According to Russia's defense ministry, these joint exercises with Belarus have one objective and one objective only, and I quote, to prepare to stop and repel external aggression. As you said before, these exercises are set to take place until February 20th. They have been announced to take place in 7 different locations in Belarus. We don't know the exact number of troops, at least not officially. But as my colleague Shona Murray mentioned earlier, some 30,000 Russian troops are believed to have deployed to Russian troops to Belarus. Add to that the more than 100,000 troops that have amassed by the border with Ukraine and in Crimea, where 6 other warships have arrived today. And you have a very, very volatile region. Ukraine insists that it needs all the support it can get, while Russia says it's not preparing or wanting to diffuse, to destabilize this region. But of course, negotiations remain very, very difficult, as of course, we could see from that press conference in Moscow today with Sergei Lavrov describing those talks between a dumb and a deaf person.